It was a case of bad behavior that came to symbolize the power of South Korea's most important people.
So in Korea, the only diamond spoons are really the chaebols.
It has been covertly known that conglomerate families and others running corporate giants often abuse their authoritative power when making decisions.
A sprawling corruption scandal.
Charges of offering bribes to former South Korean President Park Geun-hye while
They're
he was in
basically
office.
a group, a family, that runs some of the largest conglomerates and monopolies and businesses in the whole nation.
The date is December 5th, 2014, at the infamous John F. Kennedy Airport.
And a woman named Heather Cho, Korean Air's vice president for cabin service, and wait for it, daughter of the airline's chairman, Ms. Cho forced the plane to return to the gate where she had the head of the cabin crew kicked off. She was served macadamia nuts in a bag instead of on a plate. And after the story sparked outrage throughout South Korea and much of the world, she resigned some of her duties, though she's apparently keeping her title at Korean Air.
The chaebols are an untouchable group of people who own businesses that make up the fabrics of Korean society. They control everything, from politicians, media, and even the grasps in the government itself. But how did they come to so much untouchable power? To have a full understanding of the rise of these powerful people in Korea, we're going to have to dwell in its history. The chaebols' rise to power starts after the conclusion of the Korean War. The South Korean economy was in shambles. Their industrial infrastructure was in ruin, relying on imports whilst not exporting hardly anything themselves. The country was simply going broke. And it didn't help that their first president ever, Syngman Rhee, was funneling United States funds to the current large conglomerates at the time. The individual who secured the largest share of that fortune was Lee, the CEO of the Samsung Group. This was not to stimulate economic growth, but instead to consolidate his own power and rig the elections. But then, there was a military coup. The Korean people had reached their breaking point, fed up with rampant corruption, rigged elections, and the blatant misuse of public funds. So they forced an election.
Former President Yun Po-sun is the principal losing candidate. After the election, he flees to the hills, fearing reprisal. Winner by a surprisingly narrow margin is General Chun-hee Park, who headed the junta. This is a remarkably clean election. Whether its results will liberalize the government or continue a one-man rule, only Park can say.
After the revolution and when Park got into office, he began making radical industrial changes. His vision was to transform Korea from an import-dependent economy into a thriving export powerhouse, significantly boosting the nation's global trade presence. To achieve this, he had to collaborate with the owners of major business conglomerates, setting aside the fact that these were the very individuals who had manipulated the elections against him. He also had to go back on his word to crush anyone who made shady business practices during the hard times. Instead, he collaborated with major conglomerates, assigning each a crucial objective: to bring Korean-made goods to the global market. This plan ultimately worked. South Korea's global output soared, ushering in an unprecedented prosperity for its people. However, this rapid success came with a significant consequence. It bestowed immense, nearly unchallengeable power upon the owners of these massive conglomerates, giving rise to what we now know as the chaebols. After Park's death, the chaebols experienced a significant surge in wealth and influence. The conglomerates gradually expanded into various industries, steadily increasing their influence and reach. They grew to dominate nearly every aspect of Korean culture. They grew to such an extent that they virtually became too big to fail.
Lee Gun-hee, the man credited with turning Samsung into one of the world's most powerful companies, remains in a stable condition in hospital after suffering a heart attack.
And in other news, Korea's biggest conglomerate is taking another step toward restructuring, and this one is being seen as a move to speed up the group's succession process.
In October 2014, Samsung chairman Lee Kun-hee fell into a coma Overnight, his son J.Y. Lee faced an impossible task: to somehow inherit a $300 billion empire without paying South Korea's crushing 50% inheritance tax. To seize control of Samsung, Lee had to strategize, exploring every loophole and maneuvering to secure his power within the company. Lee realized the only way forward was to consolidate by removing smaller affiliates and focusing on two key subsidiaries, Samsung C and T and Chaebol Industries. With these companies, he could strengthen his control over Samsung Electronics, the crown jewel of the empire. But there was a problem. His control over Samsung C and T was slipping as external investors gained more power, while the Lee family held stronger control over Chaebol Industries. What was the solution? To merge the two companies? To push the merger through, Lee needed the approval of Samsung C&T's largest shareholder, the National Pension Service, which held 11.6% of the company. And at the time, the Pension Service answered to President Park Geun-hye. President Park was closely tied to Choi Soon-sil, her secret confidante and one of the most powerful shadow figures in South Korea. Choi had influence over Park and controlled two non-profit foundations that she used to collect donations, diverting over $36 million into her personal offshore accounts, hidden beyond scrutiny. This was illegal on multiple fronts, most notably blatant money laundering. And with this, Park exerted pressure on the Pension Service to approve the merger. Once finalized, the Lee family cemented their grip on Samsung, securing its legacy for the next generation. But their triumph came at a steep price. When the merger was complete, the truth ignited mass protests. The fury was unstoppable, until it took down both Jay Lee and President Park, landing them behind bars. For decades, Samsung has stood as a symbol of innovation, power, and economic might. But behind the sleek glass walls and corporate prestige lurks a tragedy too long ignored.
유미가 2003년 10월 달에 들어가서 일을 하다가 2005년 5월 한 말쯤 되었는데 유미가 엄마한테 전화가 왔어요.
You see, Yumi had one goal: to save enough money for her wedding and to send her younger brother to college. And when she landed a stable job at Samsung, it felt like her dreams were within reach. But what she didn't know was that this job would cost her everything. Day after day, exposure to hazardous chemicals silently poisoned her body, until one day, the unthinkable happened.
체한 것 같이 속이 미식거리고 배 아프고 그러다가 전화가 와갖고
Just 3 years into the job, Yumi was gone.
때문에 난 차에서 내리고 유미 엄마도 내려가고 뒷문을 열으니까 벌써 그 사이에 숨이 싸워야 되겠다는 생각이 들어가는데 내가 뭐 어떻게 싸워야 되는지 말을 어떻게 해야 되는지 뭐 누가 나를 아는 사람도 하나도 아직 앞이 캄캄한 거예요. 어떻게 해야